Hi there, welcome to Luminate at Home. My name is Tracy. I have done a video previous to this one where I had demonstrated how to marble paper. So these are a couple of the results of that. Now today I'm going to be using this marbled paper, so if you did manage to have a go at that, then today is the day that you'll get to use the paper. If you didn't, don't worry, it's absolutely fine because this can be easily substituted for whatever you may already have at home. So things such as old magazines, junk mail paper, or indeed any crafting paper that you might already have will be just as useful today. So don't worry if you don't have this, but anything bold and colourful that you may have will be fantastic. So I am going to show you how to transform your sheets of flat paper into a three-dimensional hanging paper ornament. So this piece here, the lantern, I did create using a piece of marbled paper that I had already made. I've also used some yarn that I happen to have in the cupboard and some odd buttons that I had lying around in the drawer. So if you're as guilty as me at collecting old buttons for no real purpose, today is their day, so please hunt them out. Now, as I said, don't worry if you don't have any marbled paper because you can make an alternative using whatever you have. So for example, here's one that I made using a magazine cover. So I opted to use the cover of the magazine because the paper is a little bit thicker. And I think that holds its shape much better. So thicker paper does work best for this piece. Again, this is another wool that I happen to have in my cupboard, and again, some more of those odd buttons. So I think that piece is just as effective. So that's the hanging lantern. And then the other piece I'm going to show you how to make is this hanging fan. So again, this piece I'm showing you just now was created using some marbled paper that I had already made. Again, just using yarn that I had at home and some of those old buttons again. All of the pieces that I've shown you so far also feature this little tassel. So this is optional. Anything that you want to indeed thread on to your ornament. Some of you might have little bells or tags or anything that you might want to add. Please just let your imagination go wild and use whatever you have at home. That's the beauty of these crafting activities. It's about using what you have. But I will demonstrate how to make the little tassel. It is quite simple and it works really well using wool, string, yarn, anything that you happen to have. So this one is the marbled paper example, and again I have made another just using a magazine page again and a different wool this time, and again another odd button. So that's today's activity. So as I am here via the medium of film, please do take the option to pause and rewind should you need to do that. It's all about going at your own pace. If you have to go back over some of the information I give you, please take your time to do that. The beauty is when you press play, I'll be right back here. So do take your time to follow the instructions carefully and absolutely go at your own pace. Now the first example, the lantern, does involve quite a lot of cutting. So I know that might not be for everybody, but if you do opt to give this one a go, do take particular care using the scissors and do go at your own pace. There's absolutely no hurry at all. If you're not up for doing a lot of cutting, then the second piece, the fan, will be a better option for you, as this piece here doesn't require any cutting at all. It's about folding the paper for this one. So as in my last film, I will be filming using an overhead camera and a side view camera. I think this gives a very clear picture of what I'm doing with my hands, and so I think maybe it's a little bit simpler to follow the instructions. But you won't see much of this, which is absolutely fine, but you will see a lot of what I'm doing on the table. So if you want to go and find whatever wool, odd buttons, whatever colourful paper that you might have lying around, and while you do that, I will get my workstation here in my kitchen set up and I will see you back here. Hanging paper lanterns. For this you will need some crafting paper, so here's my marbled paper, some wool, yarn or string, a pencil, a ruler, some scissors, some thick scrap card, so this is from a box, some sellotape, a dishcloth, a needle with a large eye, some buttons or anything else you would like to hang and add to your piece. So just getting your piece of paper that you're going to work with and using your ruler just to mark equal distances across the page. It doesn't have to be terribly exact, but this will help to give you nice equal strips of paper for your lantern. So here I've marked 1 inch apart all the way across. So again in the bottom, an inch, another inch, just working my way across. You can take your time and do this very carefully. And now I'm just going to line up both my marks and draw a nice heavy line across and work my way all the way down, just joining up both marks either side to give me nice equal strips that I'm marking here with a thick line that will be easy to follow when I come to cut out these strips. So working my way off to the bottom of the page. Final line just before cutting. So just taking my scissors now and carefully cutting following the lines that I have just made. So this will give me a number of paper strips that are all the same width and length. So you want to continue this process for your full sheet of your paper. So there is a lot of cutting here, so do take care and do take your time. Now I'm working with a A4 sheet of paper, and this sort of scale using the 1 inch thick full sheet of paper works well to give you a nice full lantern. You can experiment though using smaller paper and larger paper of course too. So there's a little bit at the end, it's not quite the same size, so I'm just putting that to the side. And now taking each of your sections, just gently puncture a hole using your pencil. So make your hole nice and big. And you'll see I'm using my dish towel here just to act as a cushion between my paper and the table so that I don't mark my table as I push through the pencil through the top and the bottom of each of the individual strips. So this is how we'll thread our lantern together. So make sure your holes are nice and big. Just take your time and gently push through the paper, top and bottom of each of those sections. And just working my way through all of the strips and the last one pushing through. So now getting your wool, yarn or string, you want to cut a very generous length that can be a bit tricky and can get in a bit of a tangle. But if you can keep it nice and long, because you need to double it over, it just gives you that extra length to play with when it comes to hanging it. But first we'll make our tassel. So this is something that you don't have to do, but if you do want to do this, you take your sheet of thick card and cut out a rectangle and then cut out a square section in your top half of the card like that. So leaving about 1 centimetre or so at the top. And then we're going to use the card to wind our wool around. So we're winding the wool just around the half that has the gap cut out in it. So winding and winding, building up lots of layers of wool, yarn or string. This will give a nice thick tassel. And so when you're happy with the thickness of the wool that you have wound around, carefully making sure that you've wound it around the section that has the gap that you cut out, you can stop and cut it there. And going back to the length of wool that you already cut, you want to slip that through the middle. So you can use the gap to make that a little bit easier. So slip the wool and pull it through so that it's halfway through, so that you have an equal length either side that you've pulled through, before tying a knot as tightly as you can, just to bunch all of that wool together at the top. So pull it nice and tight, and then a second knot just to secure that. And then cutting another section of wool, yarn or string, whatever you're working with. It doesn't have to be this long. You're going to use your gap just to feed your wool around all of the wool that you have wound around the card. So the wool that you're tying should be round the back and catching all of the wool that you have wrapped around your card. And again, securing this with a nice knot as tight as you can, and a double knot just to keep it in place. We'll bunch it all in, and there you will have the start of your tassel. You can see it taking shape at this stage. So now, using your scissors, just gently push the blade through and cut through all of your wool, and then slip your top section off, and there you have your tassel. It just needs a bit of tidying up at this stage. So pulling all the strands together, you can give the wool a trim, and this will neaten it off. And there you have your tassel. So using your needle, if you want to add buttons at this stage, thread one strand of your wool or yarn through and feed it through one of the holes of your button, and then slide your needle back off and thread it onto the other strand of wool. So this can be quite tricky. So if you don't want to add a button, that's absolutely fine. It just adds a little bit of extra weight, which helps things to hang, but you can absolutely do without. So threading that through a second hole in my button. And now the next section is just using a bit of your tape. If you trim your edges, that both of them are the same, come together and just wrap them very tightly with tape. This will give you a nice sturdy end to both your pieces of wool or string that makes threading all of your strips of paper much easier. So just paying particular attention to what side of the paper you want to be on show. So obviously I want my nice patterned section to be on show. So I am threading my wool from the pattern side through and pulling it through and just working through each of the strips, threading it through, having them all face the same way, and continuing on until all of the strips are in place. Now the taped end to my yarn is making this a much simpler job. It's so easy to push the yarn through with the hard tape at the end. And so once they are all in place, just tie a knot as tight as you can to keep all of the paper together. Just secure it all in place, like that. And then another one 2 to 3 inches from that. So this is just to stop the paper from sliding down when we thread the top sections back on, as you will see in a second. And so starting from the start again, just thread your paper all the way back through, and again repeating for each of the strips. Now your knot that you've just tied will stop your papers from falling down too far, and just simply work your way back through each of the strips, and you'll see it's starting to take shape. So continuing on carefully, again being careful to thread it through the right side, so this time it's in the non-pattern side that you're threading the wool through. Just work your way through each strip until you get to your last and final strips. Carefully continue on, and your lantern will be really taking shape now. So again, just to keep that all nicely in place, if you can, just twist that into a nice knot, push that down, keep all the strips of paper tightly together. And now you want to gently tease out each of your strips of paper just to make them into a nice ball shape and just give them equal spacing. Just work your way around the piece, and there you have your finished lantern. Hanging paper fans. You will need your choice of crafting paper. This is the marbling paper I made last time. Some wool, string or yarn. A scrap of thick card, maybe from packaging. A pair of scissors. A glue stick or any other glue or tape. Some clothes pegs. A needle with a large eye. And your choice of hanging things, so in my case I have some buttons. Start by selecting the paper you want to work with, then gently fold about 1 centimetre or so thick piece over, and then double back on that, flipping your page with each fold. So again, flipping the page, folding over, pressing down the crease, and repeating. Take your time with this process. So continue right to the very end of your page. You may have a little bit of excess paper at the end, but don't worry, this can be easily trimmed off at this stage. And there you have your concertinaed paper. So if you could flatten that back out, we're just going to fold it in half lengthwise. This is just to give a centre point. So just very carefully pushing your edges together and then gently pushing down on the crease. So fold that back out again and then gently fold back in all your original creases. So you now have a middle point to your fan. So using your thick card, so this is something I had of a box that was delivered, just cut out a small rectangle. This is how we are going to make our tassel. So this will give me the overall length of my tassel, and here I cut out a small square section. So just in the top half of the card, leaving about 1.5 centimetres from the top, I cut out a small square. And then using your wool, string, yarn, whatever you're working with, you're going to wrap around this section of the card, just winding your wool and yarn carefully over and over on that section of the card. Now, the more you do this, the bushier and thicker your tassel will be. So continuing on, wrapping around the card, around the section with the gap that you cut out, until you're happy with the thickness of the wool that you have. So you can see I do this quite a few times. So you can trim it there. And then cutting a long length of your wool or yarn. You want this to be doubled over, and you want it to be quite long so that you've got a nice length of wool to play with when it comes to hang your finished piece. So separating that and just using the gap in the cardboard to find the middle of your wool, you're going to slide your length of wool through there and slide it through till the middle, giving you equal lengths at either side. This can be a little tricky. Just take your time to get your wool in place. So roughly in the middle of your length of wool, like that, you want to tie a knot as tight as you can to gather up all the wool that you have wound round the card. So pulling as tight as you can, your first knot, and then securing this knot with a second knot. So just taking your time and pulling that as tight as you can, you will have gathered all the wool that you have wound round the card tightly together. So cutting another length of your wool, this time it doesn't have to be as long. This piece is going to be thread through the gap of your card, taking in all the wool that you have wound around the card. So wrapping round all of the wool, using the gap to help. So thread that through and pull it round the back. Pull it through and then make sure you've got all of the wool. Again, tying a knot as tight as you can. This will gather and bunch all of your wool together, creating that tassel shape. So pulling it as tight as you can for a second knot, and your tassel will be taking shape. Now, using your scissors, place one of the blades of your scissors through all of the wool and trim it. And then simply slide the top section of your wool off the card, and there you will have the tassel that just needs a little tidy up at this stage, so you can trim off the excess wool. and tidy up any extra pieces of wool that you may still have at the top section. I've got a couple of little extra pieces that I haven't caught, which I'm just going to trim here. So just take your time and neaten up your tassel, just making sure you don't cut the two long strands of wool that are going to hang your piece. Now at this stage I'm going to add my button. Buttons and beads and bells and anything that you choose to hang can be really useful to add an extra weight, so it can make your piece just hang a little better, but don't worry if you don't want to add these. These can be tricky to add. Here I am threading one strand of my wool through my needle, which is a large eye, and then just threading that through one of the holes of my buttons. And then taking that wool out of the needle. And then on the other strand, repeating this. So again, threading the needle, which can be a little bit tricky. So don't worry if you don't want to add a button, that's absolutely fine. But if you do, if you can thread the needle and then again, just pass that wool through another hole of your button. And now that button is just adding a little extra touch to the top of the tassel and a bit of weight to the tassel. I'm just going to secure the button in place with a knot. So just carefully tying the two strands of wool together and securing that with a second knot. So next we're going to attach our fanned piece of paper. Now we want to just make sure we're leaving enough length of wool at the bottom so that our tassel is clear before adding a knot. So just gently measure your piece of paper against your wool like I did, and then gently tie a knot. And so separating your wool at the knot, you're going to place your fanned paper in here and tie it on to the wool so that it becomes part of the hanging tassel. And so just securing that with a knot as tight as you can, and then a double knot just to keep that all in place. And now your final hanging piece is starting to really take shape. So you've got your tassel and your fan's now connected to the tassel, and you've got extra length of wool to hang from. So now you just want to fold in the two sides of your fan to meet in the middle. And you want to sort of jam the wool in there too. So using your glue, I've got a glue stick, but any glue would work. Equally, sellotape could work too. So putting a generous amount of glue on each side of my paper and then securing the wool in here too can make a nice neat finish. And this is where the clothes pegs come into action, if you were wondering what they were for. So folding the paper over to meet each other, and just to allow this to stay secure while it is drying, I am going to use my trusty clothes pegs just to pinch in the paper and hold it in place while the glue sets. So leave this for some time just to allow it to dry. So once it's dry, you can put your final loop in the top part of your wool. So this will be your loop to hang your piece from. So just pulling that tight, and then to keep a neat job, just trim away any extra wool you may have. And as the glue has dried, you can remove the pegs and you have your finished piece. Hi there, thanks for staying tuned. I hope you enjoyed the film and it's something that you will give a go in your home. So this is my finished lantern from today and also my finished hanging fan. So both the designs covered today are quite different. So if you have got the materials, it might be quite nice to try out both because both pieces can complement each other quite nicely when you hang them together. The other thing just to remember is that we don't all have the same materials at home, so it's all about being adaptable and using what you have. So don't worry if you haven't got any wool, for example. You can substitute this with string. You don't have to have the buttons, you don't have to make the tassels. Indeed, you can just have the lovely paper balls and those look really nice just hanging. Equally, you might be someone who has got a lot of crafting materials, so being creative, stringing up beads and bells and making your own pom-poms, things like that can really embellish a finished piece too. So be as creative as you like with what you have in your home and don't worry too much about what you don't have. The other thing to think about as well is that you can work with different sizes of paper. So I was working roughly with about an A4 sheet of paper today, but you can work with much smaller paper and indeed larger paper too, so that will just change the scale of your finished piece. And if you do enjoy making these and you want to make others, I would recommend that you do make them of different sizes so that when you do come to hang them together, you could group them in a cluster, and when they're all different sizes, that can look really effective. So I am going to find a spot to hang these in my home. They do look lovely by the window, but equally they're really nice just slipped over the handle of a wardrobe door handle, for example, or your bedroom door handle. That can look really nice. So huge thanks again for staying tuned and watching my film. I do hope that you do have some success with it. And in the meantime, do all please stay home and stay safe.